a sealed envelope, a royal crest, and a signature that sent shockwaves through centuries of tradition. When Prince William placed his initials on a confidential document behind palace walls, no one anticipated the uproar it would cause, not even the king. But one line within that decree would rewrite the rules of succession and ignite a royal firestorm. Princess Charlotte would rise before Beatrice ever had the chance. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The document didn't arrive through official channels. It was hand-delivered during a High Council meeting that had already been cloaked in secrecy. Attendees were vetted, mobile devices confiscated, and a sudden shift in the agenda raised brows. Whispers circulated through the halls of Sandringham as the doors were locked behind the last arriving duke. The subject line read, "Strategic Succession Amendment." No one knew what it meant, not yet, but they were about to witness a decision that would tilt the balance of the monarchy and fracture the family at its core. Prince William, calm yet unreadable, stood at the head of the table. In his hand was the envelope. Within it, a document drafted in collaboration with legal aids and a select few trusted voices. Most notably, King Charles had not been consulted. When William broke the seal and slid the pages across the table, silence hung like a noose. The room scanned the decree in unison. One by one, faces froze. Some turned pale. One Lord Chamberlain reportedly muttered, "This is madness." The clause was clear. By order of strategic preservation and public continuity, Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte shall, upon the assent of the sovereign, inherit designated royal duties and title precedence formerly speculated for Princess Beatrice of York. The shock wasn't just about what it said it was, about who had done it. William, acting alone, without the king's signature, had invoked a centuries-old privilege granted only to direct heirs in times of royal uncertainty. It had not been used in over 100 years, and never with such audacity. The authority had always been ceremonial, theoretical until now. What gave him the confidence? Or rather, who? Speculation immediately turned toward Catherine, whose recent silence at public events now seemed all too strategic. Reports later confirmed she had been in multiple closed-door sessions with royal advisors in the weeks leading up to the High Council. Her presence may not have been recorded, but her influence loomed large. Sources claim it was she who ensured the final language would be watertight, unchallengeable. She knew the risks, but she also knew what was at stake. Charlotte's future, and the fate of a monarchy dangerously teetering on outdated norms. Perhaps most damning was the timing. Princess Beatrice wasn't in attendance. She hadn't even been informed. Whether by oversight or design, her exclusion sent a message louder than words. It was already done. Her allies in the palace reportedly attempted to delay the signing, but William was unmoved. By the time Beatrice was briefed, the documents had already been archived, and the Royal Communications Office had gone dark. No press release, no public statement, just silence, a silence that reeked of finality. Inside, sources suggest Beatrice had been warned days before. A whispered comment from an aide. A cancelled meeting with the Archbishop. But she hadn't believed it. Not until her own cousin bypassed her in ink and law. Not until the title she had once been promised was handed, without ceremony, to someone nearly 2 decades her junior. But as the ink dried on William's signature, another story began to unfold. The story of why Charlotte was chosen, and what it cost the family to protect that choice. She was born under a global spotlight, but few realized the subtle moves being made in her name from the moment she took her first breath. Princess Charlotte, poised, intelligent, and eerily reminiscent of Queen Elizabeth in her youth, became the subject of quiet royal grooming. But what did William and Catherine see in her that made them defy centuries for her future? From the earliest days, there was something different about Charlotte, something quietly noticed behind the palace walls, whispered among courtiers but never formally spoken. While the world focused on her charming waves and coordinated outfits, behind closed doors, a calculated legacy was already being sculpted. William and Catherine didn't see her as the spare. They saw something greater, As early as toddlerhood, Charlotte's behavior struck staff as unusually observant. She noticed what others missed. When foreign dignitaries visited, her posture mirrored that of a seasoned royal. She watched, she absorbed, she adapted. What no one knew was that Queen Elizabeth had seen it too. In a private letter addressed to William shortly before her passing, now reportedly locked away in the royal archives, but to lead. She'd seen it in the child's eyes during quiet moments at Balmoral, in how Charlotte listened when others talked over each other, how she waited to speak and then landed words that made even senior aides pause. Elizabeth had sensed the burden of the future falling not on a son, but a granddaughter. Behind the scenes, this belief was acted upon with precision. While George received traditional air training, Charlotte's path was nuanced, steeped in emotional intelligence and diplomatic poise. Princess Anne, often seen as the crown's steel, took her under her wing in private sessions that never made the press. Sophie Wessex joined, adding layers of grace and discretion. And while the public saw a young girl waving dutifully, palace insiders watched as Charlotte absorbed military structure, constitutional nuance, and even private family conflicts with an unsettling depth. One moment stood out among staff. During a private royal lunch, a minor argument broke out between two senior royals. Charlotte, barely 10, calmly interjected, not to take sides but to suggest a compromise that diffused the room. One aide would later remark, "That day, I realized she's not just learning the role, she's already playing it." From then on, comparisons within the palace grew louder. She's not just a spare, she's the future. Not everyone said it aloud, but enough believed it to shape everything that followed. William and Catherine, burdened by the weight of modernizing a monarchy on the brink, found their hope anchored in Charlotte. She wasn't their gamble. She was their plan. And while they didn't say it publicly, their actions, especially William's signature on the historic document, confirmed it. They were no longer waiting for the future. They were building it, and Charlotte was its cornerstone. But every rise comes with a shadow, and Charlotte's ascent would soon cast one over another, princess long waiting in silence, Beatrice. She waited, and waited, with a smile that masked heartbreak and loyalty that went unrewarded. Princess Beatrice, once considered the quiet contender for a senior role, finds herself cut off again. But this time, the betrayal wasn't from tabloids or the public. It was from within her own bloodline. For years, Beatrice had played the long game, the forgotten royal, the dutiful niece, the one who showed up when others stepped back. Through scandal, reshuffling, and the monarchy's modern reckoning, she never once rebelled. She never leaked, never criticized. She followed the script handed to her without complaint. And yet, at every turn, her loyalty seemed to be met not with reward, but with redirection quietly repositioned, always just outside the inner circle. Her wedding, a moment meant to elevate her status, was reduced to a brief footnote in the royal calendar. Held under restrictions, stripped of fanfare, and overshadowed by larger family drama, it was a painful reminder that she was respected but never prioritized. Still, she kept showing up. Behind the scenes, she built goodwill, advocated for charities, represented the crown overseas when no one else would. Privately, she had lobbied for a more official role, even sitting down with King Charles in what aides described as a deeply personal and emotional conversation. She wasn't asking for the throne. She was asking to matter. Charles reportedly assured her that her contributions were valued, that her time would come, and she believed him perhaps because she needed to, because unlike others who distanced themselves from the institution, Beatrice wanted to belong to it. Her mother, Sarah Ferguson, had pleaded with Charles as well, a plea not just for her daughter's visibility, but for her rightful place in the royal future. "She has done everything you've asked," Fergie allegedly said. But tradition, and perhaps quiet resentment from past scandals, always stood in the way. Beatrice remained in limbo. Not exiled, not embraced, a royal ghost of potential. So when the news broke, when word spread through inner circles that Charlotte, still a child, had been elevated above her in both status and trajectory, something in Beatrice cracked. She hadn't been informed. No warning. No inclusion. just the cold realization that history had repeated itself, but this time with devastating clarity. This wasn't public perception keeping her down. This was family choice, a deliberate reshaping of the future, and she had not even been invited to the conversation. One source close to the princess shared her reaction. There were no tears, no fury, just a whisper, soaked in sorrow and resolve. "I always knew I was never truly seen." That sentence echoed through the palace. It wasn't an outburst, it was a quiet indictment, a reflection of years spent waiting for a place that would never be hers. As Beatrice reeled in heartbreak, forces inside the palace raced to contain the fallout, but the truth was already leaking into dangerous territory. Behind every historic move in the monarchy, there's often a silent strategist, and this time, all signs pointed to Catherine. Regal yet calculating, sources say she orchestrated the narrative that led to her daughter's ascension. But how deep did her influence go, and what deals did she make behind closed doors to ensure Charlotte's path was secured? From the outside, Catherine appeared composed, dignified, a beacon of tradition. But within the palace, she had become something else entirely, a force. While William bore the weight of duty, it was Catherine who steered the course, and insiders say it was her quiet determination, not his public authority, that made the impossible decision inevitable. Charlotte wasn't just his daughter, she was Catherine's legacy. And Catherine wasn't about to leave that legacy at the mercy of outdated customs or unpredictable family politics. She moved with intention, building alliances in whispers and securing power not with declarations, but with precision. Her relationship with Princess Anne had transformed over time, evolving into a strategic alliance built on mutual respect and shared goals. Anne, long known for her uncompromising loyalty to the monarchy, reportedly saw in Catherine a rare blend of strength and humility. Together with Sophie Wessex, another underestimated cornerstone of the firm, they formed what palace insiders began referring to as the Quiet Coalition. It wasn't official, it wasn't visible, but it was undeniably effective. And when conversations began swirling about the next generation's titles, it was this trio that reshaped the outcome. What truly turned heads behind the scenes, however, was Catherine's alleged confrontation with Camilla. It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but it was unmistakable. Sources claim the tension between the two women reached a breaking point during a private meeting at Clarence House. The topic? The distribution of titles, legacies, and which bloodlines would carry the royal narrative forward. Catherine made it clear, the Windsor future belonged to Charlotte, not to Camilla's extended family. Lines were drawn that day not in anger but in finality. And then came the meeting with the Archbishop. It was supposed to be routine, ceremonial. But when Catherine arrived alone, without William, it raised eyebrows. No one knows exactly what was discussed, but insiders believe it concerned spiritual legitimacy and the optics of Charlotte's rise. Whether it was about blessing, strategy, or both, it signaled one undeniable truth. Catherine wasn't simply supporting Charlotte's future, she was securing it from every angle. Even Carol Middleton played her part. Often dismissed by royal purists, Carol had masterfully crafted Charlotte's public image as poised, relatable, and commanding. Every smile, every appearance, every moment of composure had been designed to reinforce one message: Charlotte belongs. The Middleton machine, once seen as an outsider's ambition, had quietly become a royal asset. But perhaps the most powerful layer of Catherine's influence was also the most private: her internal conflict. She had once believed in tradition, in the hierarchy that rewarded patience, but motherhood had shifted her vision. She wasn't just navigating royalty, she was dismantling it to protect what she loved. To elevate her daughter, Catherine had to challenge the very system that once threatened to swallow her whole. But Catherine's chessboard didn't just position Charlotte. It cornered another power player whose silence was about to break, King Charles himself. When the king learned of William's signature, the fury behind palace gates was immediate. Raised voices, a shattered glass, and a father's piercing words. "You've gone too far this time." What began as a familial disagreement erupted into a full-blown succession crisis. The moment the document was confirmed authentic, Charles summoned his son without delay. What was meant to be a private confrontation quickly spiraled into a palace-wide reckoning. Witnesses say the king's voice echoed through the gilded halls, demanding answers, denouncing the breach of protocol. William, composed but defiant, refused to apologize. He stood by his decision, stating, "It was necessary." That sentence alone fractured the room. Necessary for whom? For the crown? For the country? Or simply for his own bloodline? What had once been a generational plan was now a battlefield of ego, legacy, and trust. And at its center, an unassuming little girl who had become the catalyst for war. The legality of William's move became the immediate question. Royal advisors scrambled through centuries-old charters, dissecting clauses rarely referenced since Queen Victoria. It was murky at best. Technically, as Prince of Wales and heir apparent, William had limited but not unprecedented authority to act in matters of succession planning in times of crisis. But the ambiguity only made things worse. It gave him just enough power to act, and Charles just enough outrage to retaliate. Within hours, the situation escalated from personal betrayal to constitutional brinkmanship. Camilla, already rattled by her diminishing influence in recent months, allegedly attempted to intervene. According to insiders, she warned Charles that allowing Charlotte's sudden rise would set a dangerous precedent, and worse, empower Catherine beyond repair. She even questioned whether Charlotte's grooming had started under Elizabeth's influence or Catherine's manipulation. But her words fell on deaf ears. Charles wasn't just furious about the act, he was humiliated by the secrecy. Camilla's frustrations, though intense, were overshadowed by the king's desire to regain control. In a closed-door council meeting held days later, tensions reached a boiling point. Charles, William, and Princess Anne sat at the same table, but this was no family gathering. Anne, though loyal to her brother, refused to blindly take sides. Her support of Charlotte's capabilities was already known, and now, she was the only person in the room who could neutralize the storm before it consumed the entire monarchy. When Charles hinted at stripping William of certain ceremonial powers and even restricting his future autonomy in matters of succession, it was Anne who stopped him. "You may silence your son," she reportedly said, "but you will fracture your kingdom." 80s. Meanwhile, threats had already begun to swirl online. Unfounded conspiracy theories, public outrage, and whispers of sabotage found their way into dark corners of the internet. Security around Charlotte was tightened immediately. The innocence of a child was now surrounded by the shadows of royal politics, and within that chaos, something shifted in Charles. For the first time, he saw not just a challenge to his authority, but the beginning of his legacy's unraveling. Yet even as the king raged and Camilla fumed, another royal outsider stepped forward with a stunning confession, one that changed everything. She had watched the crown bend, fracture, and evolve. But this time, Princess Anne refused to stay quiet. In a rare private memo leaked from inside her office, the Princess Royal backed Charlotte's ascension and revealed she had warned Charles long ago about Beatrice's unsuitability for the role William envisioned. Anne had always been the monarchy's silent sentinel, unshaken by scandal, unmoved by sentiment, and often overlooked by the media in favor of flashier royals. She had become the steel thread binding the institution when others faltered. For decades, she had measured worth not by birth order, but by resilience. And when the storm surrounding Charlotte and Beatrice's titles reached a boiling point, Anne did what she had never done before. She intervened with purpose and precision. The contents of the leaked memo stunned even seasoned insiders. In bold, concise language, Anne laid bare her position. "We must crown the one who can carry it." It wasn't personal. It was principle. Anne had long been quietly mentoring Charlotte, sharing not just royal etiquette, but the deeper philosophy of duty, sacrifice, and moral clarity. She had seen something in the young girl that reminded her of the past, a rare strength she once witnessed in a young Elizabeth. Charlotte asked questions others didn't. She listened with intent, She carried herself not like someone who wanted a crown, but someone who understood its cost. But Anne's clarity came with shadows of her own. Her relationship with Prince Andrew had been strained for years, made worse by his scandals and the protective cocoon still surrounding his daughters. That fracture inevitably shaped her perception of Beatrice. It wasn't bitterness. It was disillusionment. Beatrice, in Anne's view, had been too sheltered, too protected from the real trials of royal life. And though her heart may have been loyal, Anne questioned whether it could survive the unrelenting weight of royal duty. Behind closed doors, there had already been conflict. Years earlier, Anne reportedly vetoed a proposal to send Beatrice as a diplomatic envoy to a Commonwealth nation, citing concerns over her preparedness and political sensitivity. It created friction, not just with Andrew, but with Charles, who sought to rehabilitate Beatrice's public image. Anne stood firm then, just as she does now. The monarchy, in her mind, cannot afford sentimental appointments, not anymore. The public reaction to Anne's leaked stance was electric. Some hailed her as the last royal uncorrupted by politics. Others were stunned by the bluntness of her words. But one thing was clear. Her voice carried weight, and with that one sentence, she silenced much of the noise around Charlotte's sudden elevation. Because when Princess Anne speaks, it isn't to gain favour, it's because something vital is at stake. But if Anne's endorsement was the sword, the next revelation was the dagger. A decades-old royal file resurfaced, and it named the one person whose legacy changed everything. Deep within Windsor's archives, an old crested folder was found dated months before Queen Elizabeth's passing. Inside was a letter handwritten to Prince William. Its contents had been sealed. Until now. And when opened, they confirmed what many had long suspected. The Queen had always seen Charlotte as more than just a granddaughter. She saw a mirror of herself. The letter, protected for years under strict archival classification, was never intended for public view. Yet the moment it was uncovered, it shifted the entire narrative. Its pages were tender, deliberate, and laced with a wisdom that only Elizabeth could wield. It was not a royal decree, but it might as well have been. This was no ceremonial farewell. It was a final act of guidance. Addressed to "My beloved grandson," the Queen poured out not protocol, but instinct. She described Charlotte not in regal terms, but with emotional weight, a girl who watches before she speaks, who bears silence like armor and curiosity like a blade. It was the kind of language Elizabeth had never used publicly, but it revealed a truth she had long carried in private. The Queen's words about Beatrice were measured, though undeniably revealing. "Loyal," she wrote, "but uncertain when storms rise." It was not a condemnation, it was a confession. A silent acknowledgement that, despite her faith in duty and family, Elizabeth feared Beatrice lacked the resolve for the throne's modern complexities. There was no malice, only a sense of deep, inherited responsibility. And then came the line that froze William when he read it. "Shape the future through her." No name, no title, just the weight of a promise. And William knew exactly who her was. Alongside the letter were excerpts from the Queen's personal diary. In passages never meant to be seen by any counsel or aid, she documented small moments: Charlotte's quiet questions during Christmas walks, her calm demeanour during noisy dinners, the way she never rushed to speak but always asked why when no one else dared. These weren't just anecdotes, they were signs, reflections of a monarch who understood that strength wasn't always loud, and that the future might need a different kind of crown-bearer. In those final writings, it was clear. Elizabeth had chosen her successor in spirit, even if not in ceremony. For William, it wasn't just validation, it was a reckoning. Every instinct he'd had about his daughter, every political risk he'd taken, every confrontation he endured, now felt like a path walked in alignment with a voice from beyond. He carried the burden not just of a father, but of a future king honouring a dying queen's final request. It was no longer about inheritance, it was about intention. And it explained everything: why William acted in secrecy, why he refused to yield to Charles, and why Charlotte had become the focal point of a royal future rewritten by memory, not monarchy. But even as Charlotte's future looked sealed in royal ink, whispers from inside Beatrice's circle hinted at something far from over. Humiliation can ignite something far more dangerous than outrage. Resolve. Princess Beatrice, hurt but not defeated, launched a secret appeal to the Royal Trust, a rarely invoked channel that could challenge royal decisions. She wasn't alone, and the allies she summoned may turn this quiet storm into a royal reckoning. While the world watched Charlotte's rise with awe, behind the scenes, Beatrice was building something far more unpredictable, a coalition of discontent. The appeal to the Royal Trust, an obscure constitutional mechanism created for internal checks within the monarchy, was not a theatrical move. It was a declaration of intent, quiet, legal, and deadly in its implications. Sources revealed that Beatrice held a clandestine meeting at a private estate with 2 former royal legal advisors and a retired courtier who once served Queen Elizabeth. The objective was clear: to challenge the legitimacy of William's signature and reopen the question of succession protocol. The law may have been murky, but Beatrice was willing to dig through shadows to find clarity. Her sister Eugenie emerged as her fiercest ally. Although not as publicly visible in the unfolding drama, Eugenie's actions spoke louder than any official statement. She began cancelling appearances. She quietly notified patronage boards of her possible withdrawal. And most telling of all, she began reaching out to charity leaders with a singular message: "There are things happening behind the curtain. We can't stay silent." Insiders whispered that Eugenie was prepared to walk away from her royal duties entirely, not out of bitterness, but solidarity. And then came Fergie. Sarah Ferguson, so often dismissed by royal traditionalists, re-entered the scene like a strategist who had waited years for her moment. She began making quiet calls to sympathetic aristocrats, leaking calculated lines to friendly columnists, and meeting with former allies of Queen Elizabeth who still held influence in royal circles. Her message? Beatrice had been overlooked long enough, and the monarchy's refusal to honour its loyal daughters would not go unnoticed any longer. Social media, which the palace has always tried and failed to tame, erupted in a wave of support. Justice for Beatrice began trending within hours of an anonymous leak suggesting Beatrice's appeal had been filed. Commentators questioned the fairness of elevating a child over a seasoned royal. Memes, op-eds, and think pieces began flooding digital space, forcing royal PR teams into emergency meetings. But the most chilling moment came not online, but in person. A trusted aide delivered a handwritten envelope directly to Kensington Palace. A quiet vow that no matter how gilded the crown may be, it would never silence the voice of the discarded. But before any countermeasure could unfold, a sudden move from the crown itself silenced everything, ushering in the final chapter no one saw coming. No appeals, no reversals. In a chilling display of finality, Buckingham Palace released a historic public decree. Charlotte's new title was official. Beatrice's path closed. And for the first time in decades, the monarchy had chosen vision over tradition, youth over seniority, and emotion over politics. But at what cost? The statement came just past dawn, cloaked in the sterile language of royal formalities, but loaded with implications that echoed like cannon fire through the press and across every corner of the Commonwealth. Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte of Wales was granted precedence not only in ceremonial order but in title designation, formally placing her as future sovereign representative in specific state functions, a position historically reserved for older, more senior members of the family. For Beatrice, there was no mention, not even a footnote. Inside the palace, the moment was just as heavy. Charlotte was told in private, not by William, but by Catherine. Catherine, who had fought silently but fiercely for this future, knelt beside her daughter and explained what it meant, what it really meant. Not just titles or tiaras, but sacrifice, scrutiny, and the loneliness that only comes with expectation. Sources close to the family said Charlotte listened without a word, then simply nodded. Not as a child, but as someone who already understood the weight of what had been given and what it might cost. Later that day, William stepped into the storm. In a brief, powerful statement delivered from behind the palace gates, He addressed the world, but spoke directly to those still clinging to tradition. "The future," he said, "must be bold, even when painful. Charlotte represents not just what is to come, but what is needed now." It was more than a defense. It was a proclamation of a new royal philosophy. The crown would no longer be dictated by age, but by ability. The emotional fallout was swift. Beatrice, scheduled to appear at a charity gala that evening, quietly withdrew. No explanation, no message, just silence, and the roar of speculation in her absence. Attendees noted her name was removed from the event program within hours of the decree. In her place, the royal flag flew at half-mast, not physically, but symbolically. For many, it was a death knell to the old royal order. Behind the scenes, a final memo was circulated to all royal staff. 6 words: "No further discussions will be held." It was absolute. The decision was done. And in one sweeping act, the monarchy had made its clearest statement in generations. The progress would not pause for protocol. And then, as if scripted by fate, the image emerged. Charlotte, dressed not in regalia, but in subtle symbolism, walking beside Princess Anne in what would become their first joint official outing. No smiles, no grandeur, just purpose. 2 generations, 1 legacy, and the unmistakable silence of a torch being passed in plain sight. As one princess rose and another was left behind, the message echoed beyond the palace walls. The future of the monarchy is no longer inherited, it's earned. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.